Hey everyone, Frosthaven Digital is now launched into early access, and in this video I'm going to go through my top 5 tips for starting your campaign and things to think about. If you've come from Gloomhaven to Frosthaven, we'll include some stuff that's different, as well as if you're a brand new player to the Haven franchise, hopefully I can help you get off on the right foot. A big thank you to Arc and Snapshot Games for sponsoring this video. If you'd like to check out Frosthaven yourself, a link is down in the description and in the pinned comment. And the game is currently on a 10% discount as it comes into early access up until the 7th of August. So if you get in nice and early, you save yourself some money too. The first tip is about difficulty and your party composition, what mercenaries you might want to use. I think most players are going to be looking at the first 3 difficulty modes in this game. There are many high levels of difficulty, but I think they really are reserved for either very experienced players or once you maybe get to a little bit of a higher level and you want to challenge yourself with your mercenaries. I would advise most players start on standard, or if you are brand new to the Haven universe, there is really no harm in starting on story mode, just to be able to get that forgiveness of not having to burn as many cards. It can really help you learn hand management side of things and how difficult the game can be. However, realistically, we should all be playing on the standard mode, at least I would suggest, because that is the real meat and potatoes of the Haven experience. That will teach you how to hand manage properly, to watch out for your stamina, and you'll always have that little bit of jeopardy there that you might lose the scenario if you're not too careful. Although experienced players may want to start on veteran difficulty as well. So potentially if you are more experienced, maybe consider starting on veteran, especially if you already know these characters. Maybe you've played the board game, so you are quite comfortable with the actual characters themselves. If you are, however, brand new to the characters but have a little bit more experience, maybe you start on standard, or if you're looking to challenge yourself. But if you are brand new, then maybe you might look at the story mode. And again, like I said, you can always change the difficulty later and potentially amp those up. In terms of party composition, this is really going to come down to how many mercenaries you want to run. 2 mercenaries, so if you're playing either co-op, one of you controlling each, or if you're playing solo, just controlling 2, this is where you're going to feel the most limited, I would say, in terms of your class choices. In this instance, you're probably going to want to go with at least one tanky frontlining type character. And the 2 most tankiest and most kind of well suited to this, at least initially, is the Banner Spear and the Drifter. Those 2 characters have a nice suite of abilities that can both tank as well as heal a little bit themselves as well. So they can really kind of sit there on the front line very easily. You can also potentially play something like a Bone Shaper as more of a advanced tank. However, that class does require a little bit more proficiency to pilot really well. So I would suggest if you are starting new, then I think you are looking really at the Banner Spear and Drifter if you are playing a 2 mercenary party. If you are playing 3, then you might still consider one of those characters, but certainly then you can open it up a little bit more. And if you are playing 4, then really you have pretty much any character that you would like to address here, because you can probably split things equally across the party. My personal preference here is to go for 3 mercenaries. I've always found that 3 mercenaries when playing solo is just the sweet spot. Obviously, if you're playing co-op, then really it's going to be however many you're playing with, and that's really the player count that you will be having. But for me, when I play solo, I find the 3 mercenaries to be the sweet spot. That gives me enough kind of stuff to do and interactions between my characters, the freedom to kind of make maybe some choices with those classes and those characters that aren't maybe just for the benefit of everyone. Perhaps I can be a little bit selfish or a bit greedy with some of my item and card choices and how I want to play, as well as I still get loads of good loot and still have that opportunity to loot as well. If you are coming from Gloomhaven, there is a new system that is introduced in this called Inspiration. And for every character that you play under the 4 count, you will get 1 inspiration point at the end of each scenario. And what this allows you to do is kind of rebalance it a little bit, because you're not playing with quite as many mercenaries. Because you're not playing with as many mercenaries, then you don't have as many enemies, generally speaking, in the scenario. So potentially less opportunity to gain some loot, potentially less opportunity to kind of move forwards. The inspiration system looks to kind of fill that gap by allowing you to potentially unlock more classes in one go, or for example use it as a wild resource to be able to finish things as well. So it can be a really nice way of filling that gap if you are playing with 2 or 3 mercenaries, and it's a nice way to kind of keep pace so you're not feeling like you're really losing out. During the early access launch, inspiration is going to be a little bit weird because inspiration is generally used for unlocking more classes when you retire. When you retire, you get the ability to spend inspiration to potentially immediately complete another personal quest to then get another class potentially unlocked or some more content unlocked. The reason for this is that if you're playing in a 2-player party, then you don't fall behind the curve that potentially you would in a 4 mercenary party. So it's a nice little thing to have. However, in early access, we're not going to have access to all of the different classes or all of the different buildings and things like that. So whether or not you want to use it for that, I can't say right now. If we are talking about the full launch of the game, you absolutely want to be saving it for unlocking classes, especially at 2 and probably at 3. At 4 mercenaries, you will earn a little bit of inspiration, probably through events or other things. So you can probably pretty safely use that as a wild resource whenever needed. But I will stress that the use of inspiration during early access, I'm not too sure on quite yet. So I would avoid using it, especially if you are planning on maybe playing 1 save all the way through the early access period, because we will be getting new classes every 3 months. So keep that in mind. Another general point about your party composition is the complexity of these characters is much harder, and the complexity scale that the game shows you on the overall statistics screen is pretty accurate, really. There are maybe some that I would say are maybe a little bit easier than the game suggests, but I will say all of the classes, aside from maybe the Drifter and maybe the Banner Spear, are probably on the more complex side compared to Gloomhaven classes. This will mean it will take you longer than just a couple of scenarios to really kind of feel them out and get used to playing that class and what kind of combos you can do. So definitely playing on a lower difficulty to maybe get to learn the characters is a good idea, then ramping up from that point onwards as well. Tip number 2 is to do with battle goals and a new mechanic which is called Masteries. Battle goals are the way that you earn perk points and unlock perks for your class. Whereas in Gloomhaven, these were sometimes a little bit boring. It was just upgrading your modifier deck in some way, making you a bit more efficient at attacking, a little bit more likely to do damage. However, in Frosthaven, you have important tactical perks that will really change the way that your character can operate, make things easier for your character and give you some nice buffs, not just while attacking, but also while doing other things too. So this can be a really easy way for you to improve your character quite quickly. And especially considering you'll often be spending your loot and things that you collect actually on upgrading the outpost and not on yourself. So it's really important to try and focus on these. I will say as well to new players, please just sometimes take the easy 1 checkmark battle goal. You can quite often get some really nice looking and sometimes very tempting 2 checkmark battle goals, but they can be almost impossible to complete in certain scenarios, or you can lose them very quickly, or they might even make you play in a way that is just unfun, for example. So what I would do is I would honestly just focus on getting a single check mark per scenario, and then if you're a more experienced player and once you get a bit more experience, you'll start to understand, okay, yeah, that one is achievable for my class. Okay, yeah, in this scenario, that one is achievable. And you'll start to get a real understanding of what your character excels at, and so what battle goals you can go for. Then we have Masteries, a new mechanic for Frosthaven, and each class has the ability to unlock 2 potential masteries. And what these are 3 check marks. They're essentially a perk point. So if you manage to do a mastery, you get a straight up perk point, which is hugely important and impactful. And these can be achieved sometimes right from level 1. Sometimes you might have to wait a little bit longer to get some more cards to unlock them. You'll get a sense of what classes can do this, but right from level 1, even in the very first scenario, some of these are possible. So keep an eye on your masteries and try and gauge when might be a good time to go for them. Probably wouldn't go for them straight away unless you're an experienced player on the first turn, because you're probably going to end up sort of maybe ruining the first couple of scenarios if you do go hard on them and you don't really know what you're doing. But after you get that kind of experience with a class, played through it a few scenarios, then you go, right, okay, now I understand what that really means and what I would really need to try and do to get those masteries. But yeah, if you can do these, they are a huge upgrade for your character and something that you should definitely be focused on. You can always keep track of your masteries in the top right-hand screen while you're playing inside a scenario, along with your battle goal as well, to keep an eye on how well you are doing in these areas for trying to unlock those all-important perks. And my tip 3 in Frosthaven is to loot, and you need to be looting as much as you can really get away with in any given scenario. Loot is done a little bit differently in Frosthaven because you're going to be needing resources, and lots of different resources, to be able to upgrade your outposts. And looting is done by a loot deck. This is a deck that each scenario has, and you can find the consistency of what is in that deck on the scenario start screen to see what kind of loot you might be able to find in this scenario. And then you draw from that deck every time you loot. So you can sometimes go to certain scenarios to find specific types of resources, or if you're looking for a special item or something like that, you'll know that this is a scenario that includes a one-off item, for example, that you might be able to find by looting regularly. So make sure that you are looting, because so much of this game is tied to that progress, and you want to be going to the outposts and being able to build and upgrade as much as possible, which we will come into in a minute. But also, the looting cards in Frosthaven are so much more fun than the looting cards were in Gloomhaven. All of the classes will have a loot card, and all of them will link to their core mechanics in some way. So they're actually much easier to just kind of like introduce into your regular play, rather than maybe kind of going, well, I'm going to do something kind of a little bit not so nice for the party, but I'm going to go get this loot, right? Sometimes you might have that choice of looting or killing something, or looting or doing this. A lot of the loot cards actually synergize really, really well with just taking your turn well, and feel good when you can do them. So make sure that you are looking at your loot card and you understand kind of like how that loot card can really fit into your playthrough. And I would really leave that loot card in your hand as well when you level up at least a few times, because yeah, you're going to need that loot, and it's so important for that early progress. Also, quite a lot of personal quests will be tied to looting either specific things, or potentially collecting a lot of gold, or of course collecting a lot of items. So looting really does just kind of flow throughout this game as a much more involved and key part. Tip number 4 I've alluded to is building and upgrading. This is so important to making progress in Frosthaven, and you only get the opportunity to do one building per outpost phase, unless of course you're kind of cheesing the game a little bit by going to a scenario and abandoning. But we're going to pretend that we're all playing the game very honestly here. So make sure that you take the opportunity to do that, as well as making sure that you take the opportunity to upgrade as well. Upgrading, especially the alchemist early, that can be very good if you have a lot of herbs, because then you can distill herbs to be able to find new potions and really unlock that potion table really, really quickly, which can be great. As well as the craftsman will give you access to lots of better items much quicker as well. But definitely be saving your resources to be able to build things first, and make sure that you do that building as your very first thing, or that upgrading as your very first thing. Also, once you get the different camps, you might get the lumber camp, and you get the hunting lodge, and you get the mining camp. This is a very cheap way for you to be able to buy one resource of that type early on in the game. So make sure that even if you don't intend to use it, you actually go down and buy those resources every single outpost phase, because it's just a good conversion rate and a way for you to get easy resources and keep that progression going. In early access though, we won't have access to all of the buildings or being upgraded to a certain point. So there will be some kind of diminishing return at some point with the buildings, I'm sure. However, if you build the buildings now, anything that gets added later will immediately be unlocked if you've done the prerequisites. So there's no real harm here in just upgrading as much as you possibly can and building as much as you possibly can. And my 5th and final tip is winter is coming, and you should prepare for it. During the outpost phase, in the top center of the screen, you have the sun icon. That shows you that you are currently in summer. And when you start your game, you always start at the beginning of summer. But winter is coming, and when that eventually clocks down, you will introduce the outpost winter events and the road winter events, which are always a bit harsher on the players. This can involve Frosthaven being attacked much more regularly than it would be in summer, as well as just bad things happening in general, which might require you to have a bit of a stockpile of resources to be able to deal with, as well as a very nicely stocked barracks full of troops to help you defend as well. So my tip here is really to keep an eye on when winter is coming, and ensure that perhaps halfway through summer, you start to think a little bit more about your spending of resources and don't spend out completely every single time. This also reiterates my point about ensuring that you are buying those extra resources for the 2 gold from all of the camps when possible, because you will need those to be able to do repairs or fend off attacks in different ways. So make sure that you're doing that, as well as keeping, like I said, as many troops as you can in that barracks, because that will really help you fend off those attacks. So there we have it. Those are my 5 top tips for starting your campaign in Frosthaven Digital. Thank you again to Snapshot and Art Games for sponsoring this video. If you would like to check out the game, there is a link in the description and in the pinned comment to go check it out. It is on a 10% discount until the 7th of August. So you can get in there nice and early and get that discount, as well as there's a Gloomhaven digital bundle as well with 10% off that game. So if you haven't checked out the original game, I can highly recommend that game as well. Me, I'm going to be streaming Frosthaven Digital in the next coming few days if you're watching this when I publish it. So come over to twitch.tv to check out me playing live. I will be hopefully streaming maybe on YouTube as well, but I can't promise that right now, but I'm looking into options for that. But apart from that, I will be making some videos. I will be out and about, and I can't wait to really start playing Frosthaven Digital with you all when it launches into early access today, the 31st of August. So I will catch you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.